Can the veggies beat the meat eaters? Today, we finally settle the debate. We're gonna use this square-shaped map, and I'll carve out a small strip of water on each side so both groups can fish and build docks for fishing boats, warships, and transport vessels. On the left side, I'm setting up a jungle biome. Seems like the perfect spot for the veggies since it's packed with plants and greenery. On the right, we'll go with a savanna biome because that's where wild animals usually spawn the most. Next, I'm dropping a small group of capybaras in the jungle. I gave them a herbivore diet plus algae and grass so they can feed on the ground if they need to. I actually wanted to add wheat to their diet too, but doing that automatically disables the herbivore option, so I decided to just stick with that. Then I moved over to the savanna, where my first idea was to spawn a bunch of zombies to represent the meat eaters, but unfortunately, they still can't form intelligent civilizations, so I had to delete them. For some reason, a bunch of trees popped up where I removed them, so in the end, I went with hyenas instead. Honestly, they fit the biome way better anyway. In this case, I gave the hyenas carnivore, insect eater, and fish eater diets, and just for fun, I added cannibal too, because at the end of the day, meat is meat. With everything ready, I hit play so both groups could start building their first villages. Over in the savannah, the meat eaters started laying down the foundations of their town, but at first, they weren't really doing much. They were mostly flirting and chatting around until they finally got to work and built their first campfire. By this time, the veggies had already built a small village and a storage area where they began keeping their herbs and plants, which were immediately eaten by their own king. Then, a few little cats started appearing nearby. Obviously, they couldn't be used as food, not even by the carnivores, or at least I want to believe that, but they could make for some pretty good pets. Once both sides had officially founded their kingdoms, I renamed the veggies first, gave them a color that fit better, and then did the same for the meat eaters, so it'd be easier to tell them apart during the experiment. Around 3 decades went by, and both the veggies and the meat eaters stayed perfectly even in population, with 25 people each. However, the veggies had already started forming an army. Their buildings have a really strong connection to nature, staying true to the environment they live in. I even spotted the army captain, armed with a spear, silver armor, and a leather helmet, which is honestly impressive given how little time has passed. Meanwhile, the meat eaters built several houses, but I haven't seen a single soldier yet. They did manage to build a mine though, just like the veggies. What really caught my attention is that both groups built a windmill too. It doesn't seem to serve any real purpose for either of them, but maybe it's just one of those automatic game structures that every civilization builds, no matter what their diet is. A century later, the veggies had proven their complete dominance, both in overall population and in military strength, basically doubling the numbers of the meat eaters. This massive growth came mainly from building tons of new houses and constantly expanding their territory. Their army also grew a lot thanks to the construction of training barracks. You can also see the windmill they put up earlier, which doesn't really serve to produce food, but works as a storage area for other important resources. They even founded new settlements close to the capital, which pushed their territorial expansion even more. The entire southern part of the map is still uninhabited, but the thick vegetation there perfectly explains the high level of development the veggies reached during this century. On the other hand, the meat eaters are way more limited since they depend entirely on the animals in their surroundings. The bushes are useless to them, so they just pile up between their houses without any purpose. They did finally build a training barracks, just like the veggies, but they're still way behind in comparison. Even so, they started expanding southward, sending settlers to create new villages, and for the first time made contact with the ocean, which could mark a new turning point in their development. They haven't built any ports yet, but it's only a matter of time before they do, and when that happens, their growth will skyrocket. Having access to the ocean means a much more sustainable food source through fishing. If they rely only on hunting land animals, survival will be tough, since there are barely a few ostriches left scattered around the area. Here we can take a closer look at the chart, showing each civilization's current status. The meat eaters show a pretty unstable population growth, along with a steady rise in their hunger rate, which the veggies seem to have completely under control. It's true that their hunger levels are also increasing, but in a much steadier and more manageable way. The real concern is that the meat eaters have started to record deaths from starvation. So far, it's only been 5, but that's already a clear sign of what could happen next. 300 years later, things look very different. The veggies have exponentially increased their lead, doubling the total population of the meat eaters and completely outnumbering them in military strength. Even though the meat eaters finally managed to reach the shores, build ports, and start using fishing boats, it's been impossible for them to match the veggies' pace. Their population growth is directly tied to a constant food supply, something the vegetarians have fully mastered. It's really hard for the meat eaters to find food now, since there are basically no animals left in their surroundings. Some try to go out hunting, but most come back empty-handed. The veggies, on the other hand, have access to a massive amount of vegetation and tons of of berry bushes, which completely solves the hunger problem within their civilization. The chart makes it painfully clear. While the veggies keep growing steadily and maintain an extremely low hunger rate, the meat eaters show a much more chaotic pattern. On top of that, their starvation deaths have reached dangerously high levels, and if their hunger rate isn't even worse, it's only because most of the people who are starving are already gone. We hit year 650, and the population gap between the veggies and the meat eaters is still huge. That said, the percentage difference has narrowed a bit. When it comes to military strength, the veggies still field roughly 3 times as many soldiers as the meat eaters. As for upgrades, they haven't been pushing the tech frontier lately. Instead, they've focused on cranking out lots of housing to keep supporting steady population growth. You can't easily spot the houses here since they blend right into the jungle, but there are actually tons of buildings scattered through the vegetation. On the meat eater side, it's a different story. There are wide, empty stretches with no development, while the coastal areas show a high density of homes, underscoring just how crucial the shore is as their main food source and lifeline. Alright then, time to tear down the wall and start the fight. When we hit play, no formal war breaks out right away. Both civilizations just start interacting and checking each other out for the first time. A few meat eaters wander curiously toward the veggies, and let's remember, they're capybaras, so to the meat eaters, they look like an easy meal. It doesn't take long before they rush in together to attack. Meanwhile, the veggies scramble to organize a defense, quickly forming armies along the border, hoping to hold back the carnivore advance and protect their land. The southern region gets hit the hardest, completely devastated by the meat eaters' assault. What's strange though, is how little the veggie army actually reacts. They're just standing there, only a few steps from the front lines, watching without moving a muscle. Up north, things are even worse. Civilians are forced to pick up weapons to defend the kingdom since the soldiers arrived too late, and from the looks of it, they don't seem too eager to fight anyway. Taking advantage of the distraction, a group of meat eaters manages to capture a central village and quickly prepares to seize another nearby territory. Civilians try to defend it with everything they've got, but they're wiped out almost instantly by the ferocious carnivore horde pushing forward. Even though the meat eaters are outnumbered by the veggies, their diet and harsh lifestyle seem to have given them greater physical strength and impressive endurance. Still, their momentum doesn't last long. Soon, a northern village falls under veggie control, marking the beginning of what could be a full-on herbivore counterattack. Blinded by hunger, the meat eaters start destroying the very structures they built centuries ago, just to reclaim land and resources. The war drags on. Months turn into years and years into decades, as both sides keep gaining and losing ground in an endless struggle for control of the map. For the first time in the entire conflict, the meat eaters actually surpass the veggies in population. And that's not all. The veggies' homes take heavy damage, causing one of their secondary kingdoms to split off and declare independence. This new faction seems to want nothing to do with the war, keeping a low profile to avoid provoking the meat eaters. That internal fracture leaves the veggies in a dangerously weak position, to the point where they end up losing their capital. Trapped in a small coastal village, the meat eaters launch one final devastating attack that wipes out the last surviving herbivores. Then they celebrate their victory, convinced the age of famine is finally over now that they have an endless supply of capybara meat. Meanwhile, that breakaway veggie kingdom quietly watches from a distance, content and unbothered, knowing the meat eaters won't come after them, at least not while there's still food left.